Going deeper into my work, I choose to photograph womanhood and everything that it encompasses because I feel very attuned with the nature of the experience. I'm intrigued by the way we are able to meet society's adversities with grace and compassion, or how the women that came before us stood their ground when their strength was questioned. It's important to cultivate a future where young women are confident in their capabilities and their voices are encouraged. My work is just a safe space for that. Hi VSCO community, my name is Simrah Farrukh and I am an American Pakistani photographer. My work is a focus on fashion and beauty through an intersectional lens of femininity, community, and culture. I actually started photography around the same time that VSCO launched its app, and it really laid the foundation for my personal style. The images I'm going to be editing today are actually from a shoot I did a couple of weeks ago called The Duality of Women, which is basically about how as women we're able to embrace both the masculine and feminine sides of ourselves. It's something that should be celebrated, something that should be acknowledged, and something that should be affirmed. Before I begin editing, I usually remind myself of the brief and what emotions I want to evoke through these images. So the first photo I'm going to be editing is on an orange backdrop. So all of these images were shot in a studio with continuous lighting. The concept of this shoot was Duality of Women, which basically is the idea that women have this strength and this ability to embrace both the feminine and the masculine sides of ourselves. And this is something that should be embraced, it should be acknowledged and affirmed. With that in mind, I really want people to see these images and feel empowered. So I try to think of keywords in editing that would help me with that. I want these to have a contrasted look so that it's a bit bold, but I still want to keep it soft and dreamy to keep that feminine side. And then I really want to keep a muted color palette, not anything that's overly saturated. So that's what I'm going to work with. The first thing I'm going to do is go into the exposure, and I'm going to bring it down slightly. Then I'm going to go into the contrast and adjust that to my liking. Overall, I want to keep it low contrast, but I think this image does need a bit more contrast, so we're going to add very little. Cool. While I'm here, I'm also going to crop this image. I usually crop my images to a 4x5 frame. There's just something about it. I like that it keeps things contained and it really gets rid of like any excess negative space, any excess sky, any excess backdrop. So we're going to do a 4x5, and I really like how she's in the middle, but she's leaning towards one side. So I'm going to emphasize that, making the size a bit smaller so that she is more in the third column. Cool. HSL is probably my favorite tool because this is where you can really go into specific colors and adjust to your specific color palette. There's not too many reds in this image, so I'm going to leave that alone. And we're going to move on to the orange. I really want the orange to be more warm toned, so I'm going to bring the hue down. Saturation slightly up. And you can see the adjustments that have been made with all of the edits so far by holding down on the image and releasing. I like to make very subtle changes to my edits because the more subtle, the better. That's what I've learned in all my years of editing, and it's just the way to go. There's not too many yellows except for in her jewelry and also slightly in her skin. So again, keeping the subtlety, I'm going to bring the hue of the yellow more towards the magenta side because right now her skin is looking a bit too yellow and a bit too green. And we're going to further adjust that with a different tool. So with the blue, if I zoom into her hair, you'll see that there's blue on her hair because the light that was coming from above was on the cooler side. So I want to warm it up a bit. I'm going to bring it slightly to the left, and then I'm going to bring the saturation of it down. And we're also going to bring the lightness down. And that fixed it for me. Next, I'm going to adjust any white balance. So it's a bit too yellow and a bit too green. So I'm going to bring the temperature slightly down to the blue side, and we're going to lift the tints to the magenta side. A great tool that VSCO has is the skin tone adjustment. And essentially it's the same thing as the tone, where it's magenta on one side and green on the other side. And zooming in onto her skin, I fixed her skin tone for the most part, but I'm just going to add a bit more warmth to it. And when we apply a filter, it's going to further affect the skin tones, so we'll come back and do any fine-tuning needed. While I'm here, I'm going to bring the fade of the image slightly up just to give it more of that dreamy and soft look. And then I always go to split tone, and in all of my images, more often than not, I'm adding a green shadow tint. And this is also going to be very subtle. So essentially what I've done is I've flattened the image and I've desaturated any of the saturation that the camera put into it because I want to be able to control the colors myself when I apply a filter. So now going into the filter section of the VSCO app, VSCO shows thumbnails of all the different filters that they provide and what your image looks like with those filters. So I do an initial skim and see what pops out to me. My go-to filters are usually C1 Pro, C8 Pro, and G6 Pro. And right now, C8 Pro is standing out to me. And when you click on the filter, there are a few things. So if you click the filter name, it will actually pop up an information panel that tells you a bit more about the filter. So what it was created for initially, the inspiration behind it, what it was inspired by, and this has really given me the knowledge of different film stocks, and it's given me the knowledge to put in the back of my head so that when I'm editing images, I'm like, okay, with this scenario, what filter or what coloring look would look good with this? So when I click on a filter, I'm able to adjust the strength, the contrast, the color, and the tone of each filter. So initially, it defaults the filter to the strongest, and I'm going to bring it down so it's not as harsh. I'm gonna see what I can do with this filter, and if I'm not vibing with it, I'm gonna move on to another filter. But right now, I'm just seeing what this filter offers with the different adjustments. Okay. Another filter for this image that stands out to me is FB5, which is Fuji Velvia 50. I'm going to bring the strength of this one down. And I'm going to bring the character up, I think. And bring the warmth up as well. Okay, I think I'm liking how this looks. I'm going to go to the exposure and adjust it slightly. My workflow process is very much about going back and forth between different tools because you really need to fine-tune. So I'm going to try to adjust the highlights that are on her face. It's a bit overexposed on her face, which isn't too big of a deal because it works for this image. But I'm going to take the burn tool anyway and try to darken the highlights. Okay, so I think I have the image where I like it. I'm now going to go into the effects panel of the VSCO app, and I'm going to check out the different textures, frames, light leaks, and see if anything stands out for this image. So for this image, I've been trying to fix the highlight that is on her forehead and on her face under her eyes, but I'm not getting to a place that I'm satisfied with. So I'm going to go to the light textures, and I'm actually going to try these different light leaks and see if that can help with the effect. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to almost save this image. Overall, it's a really great photo, but because of that slight overexposure, and I'm not really able to fix it with the exposure tool or the dodge and burn without destructing the image, I'm going to find an alternative way to work with the image. So that's the great thing about these different light leaks. I think I'm happy with light 11 on the VSCO app. It's as if it feels as if like a warm ray of sun is like shining down on her, and that feels better to me that her face is slightly overexposed. So adjusting that, I think now I am happy with how this looks. That's all I have to share today. I really hope that this was insightful and that you were able to take away some guidance and some tips, and I really appreciate you for watching. Bye!